Hello, welcome back to City Planner Plays City Tips, where I review your cities and give you tips on how to improve them. Today we are looking at Artificial Ideas City of Larch Shores. This is a patron and I thank you for your support. It really means a lot to me. So this map is the Seven Lakes map that came out with the Mass Transit DLC. And the build is completely vanilla with a couple of DLCs included. Artificial Idea indicated that their skill level is intermediate, and they provided a story for the build. The town was built on the back of logging, which grew into a thriving forestry industry. After growing a successful fishing industry as well, the city became fairly wealthy and began to look towards importing goods and tourists. Thrill Point, the sightseeing district, were specifically designed to bring in scores of tourism dollars. Downtown has become a dense grid of high-rises, interconnected by metro and bus lines, but still experiencing significant gridlock at critical locations. So hopefully I can help diagnose some of those issues today and figure out how we can fix them. So let's take a moment to talk about what this is. This is an opportunity for me to review your cities and give you tips on how to improve them. It's an opportunity for the community to share ideas rather than just look at my builds. And it's a chance to get a City Planner City Score. What this isn't is an opportunity for negativity or roasting. Remember, I'm here to help, not poke fun at you or make you feel uncomfortable. And everyone in the comments, I hope you show the same level of respect. They've taken the time to show us their build. This should be a relaxing experience where you get constructive feedback that you could use to improve your city. So without any further ado, let's look at how I score the cities. We're going to take a look at the map, the city layout and roadway configuration, land use planning, transit, city services, unique features, aesthetics, and then we will give a City Planner City Score. So without any further ado, let's hop right in. First up, let's take a look at the map. So this city, like I mentioned, was built on the Seven Lakes map, which was part of the Mass Transit DLC. And I'm going to come out and say it, I love this map. This reminds me of the Madison area, which is built on 5 major lakes with numerous small ones around it. Geography like this means that your city has great potential, but also a significantly constrained geography. And you can see that right here. Lots of options for where to build your city, but the geography is a significant constraint. So that's something to keep in mind with this map. In the game, this is a heavily forested map, which is different than Madison. We have a lot of agriculture around us. There's also a couple of pockets, if we pop in here and we take a look, where you'll see that there's an ore potential, potential for a small ore industry. And obviously there's a ton of water, so that's an opportunity on this map as well. There's only one highway connection, which is a unique constraint to this map that I actually kind of love. There are also 2 railway connections, one coming from the south and another coming from the east. So that should weigh heavily on where you place your industries. And because there are 2 railway connections, it means that you could import resources if needed to create other industries. So this map, if we take a look at the terrain, is mostly flat, but similar to Madison, if you look out in the distance, there are hills, which means that there are some opportunities for some really striking views if you plan your city appropriately. You could have views of all the lakes and then all of the hills in the background. There's also the opportunity for a ship route. If we take a look, we pop in here, you'll see that we actually have 1 ship area. We also have the ability to make airlines as well. So some real potential on this map. Now, one of the unique constraints, like I mentioned, is the lakes themselves. There are opportunities to come through and have your transportation corridors come through these little isthmuses that are created throughout the map. There was one here that was moved and we removed, and we will get into that a little bit later on in the video. But it creates a really unique opportunity to either set up transportation networks in the water or to route all of your transportation through those corridors. So if you like this map and you want to know more about it, I would highly recommend you check out Lee Hawkins' More Money, Less Traffic Series 2, where he builds on this map and explains just what opportunities this map has, because there's really a lot here if you take advantage of it. So For this particular map, I'm going to give it a score of 5 out of 5. I love this map. I think there's so much potential here, and it's so unique. Next up, we're going to review the city layout and roadway configuration. So if we pop right in here, you can see that the principles of roadway hierarchy have, for the most part, been relatively respected, and I appreciate that. They've done a good job. Right here, we've got our arterial branching off into 3 collectors that distribute traffic throughout the city. And you'll see that throughout this, they're not overbuilding their collector network. There are a number of connections that have been made throughout the city, and we're not funneling traffic all that much. There's a couple of places where that's occurring, and I'll highlight those and ways to fix it. That said, there are a couple of questionable decisions that I'm going to highlight. First and foremost, there's a lack of connectivity generally in this city. You can see it right here as we come through off of our highway, which I really love that they didn't take this highway and just bulldoze it right through the city. I think it's very appropriate to just stop it and let your city form around a local roadway network, particularly if there's only one highway. Why get overly highway centric? But right here, you see that we have this road, which has one connection here, a bridge over it here, another connection here, and a roundabout to go south. So I think this is a traffic management idea, but I question it just a bit. So I appreciate that there are pedestrian connections through here, but we should really look at our block lengths. So if we take a look at this, so we'll pop through here. This is 1,457 feet. So I think a good way of figuring out your block lengths is to actually compare them to real places. So here's a graphic of a variety of American grids and their block lengths. And what you'll see is that none of the grids have blocks that are this long. Now, I know this is an extreme example, but I think the reason why this is important is New York City, though it's very walkable, one of the reasons it's walkable is there are cut-throughs between these blocks because the block lengths are insane. And where there are no cut-throughs, it's not walkable for everybody. So that's a limitation of that. It's a reason why you need mass transit in New York to be successful. And I would think that the block lengths actually make transit in New York City more successful. But it's not just there. We'll look at some other block lengths. Right here, you could see that we have a block. Now there is a path through here, and a couple things popped up that happens from time to time. Easy enough to fix. We can just dezone that. But if we take a look, this block length here is 1,041 feet. Again, that is longer than New York City. And what this means is that when we pop in here and we take a look at where people are going, they're not really walking on these paths. And honestly, the walking path, the trips aren't great generally. You're not even able to get a block up. Now, part of that is that because this is vanilla, there's not a great way to, and I'll fix this real quick. There's not a great way to make this mid-block crossing happen. Now, the one way that I would do it is if you have just normal roads here, you could upgrade just the segment. And maybe you don't love where it's coming. You could fix that by, deleting and trying to create your own nodes. So we could certainly get creative about that. But even having this here, you're going to start to see people cross because I've created some crossings. If you want this to look a little bit more natural, you could certainly extend that to the end of the block. Really, it's your call there, but that's the only way that you're going to create reasonable mid-block crossings. This won't just happen to be perfect. The node must be in just the right spot for these couple of blocks. This one's not great, but what that's going to do is if we pop in here, we can see that there's going to be more north-south trips through here. So that's really valuable, and that means that more people are going to be more willing to be pedestrians. So that is a bit of an issue in my opinion. The other thing is we're trying to solve problems that we've created. So right here, we've added a bridge to address the lack of connectivity. And that, to me, that's creating more problems than it's solving. It'd be better just to have the connection here. I understand there's a metro station here, and maybe the reason this bridge exists is because at one point there were just too many people crossing the road, backing up traffic. But that's because there's a lack of options. So what you're seeing is everyone's coming through this corridor and there's no way to get off. So they're all forced to come down here, disperse up and around. And I bet you this bears out. If we take a look at the trips on here, yeah, you can see that everyone's coming up through here and then they have to disperse left or right, or take one of these few entrances in here. Tons of traffic. Look at all of this traffic on this road. This road right here is functioning as an arterial, and that's why it's totally backed up. I'm gonna venture to guess that if we just add a couple of connections through here, traffic flow will probably improve some. I'm gonna get rid of this bridge too. And I feel like I'm a bull going through a china shop as I just knock all this stuff down. We'll do a little bit of vanilla traffic management as well. Now I do have Traffic Manager installed, and I could certainly use that, but I'm gonna keep this true to the vision of the author, and only use the junctions that are available to us. So if we come through here, let's speed this up for a minute and see what happens. So we just got traffic to reach 80% by adding additional connectivity. So that's just dispersing the traffic from this road into other locations. And if we had even more connectivity throughout the city, you'd see even more of this. This is a 2-lane road, so this is really functioning as a local collector, whereas I'd look at this as like a major collector bordering on arterial. So I wouldn't worry about all the connectivity through here. It's a good thing. So that's one thing that I would really focus on. So some other transportation and city configuration issues. So this bridge right here, to me, seems forced. I don't know why this was built, but I don't think it would be built in reality. So for the time being, that would mean that this area lacks a bit of roadway connectivity until you're able to purchase more tiles. It's important to realize that the builder only has 4 tiles unlocked right now. So they have more tiles to work with if they're going to stick with the 9. And if they wanted a road going all the way around the lake, that's certainly a possibility in the future. But right now, it's not that big of a deal that this isn't there. In fact, I think it's more of a problem than a solution. So I would much rather see a small bridge going to this island if you really need that bridge, or something like that, rather than this big bridge across carrying a bunch of traffic. Which brings us to our rail network. So this is a kind of a combination land use transportation issue, and that is we've got our rail network coming in from the south and the east, and we've got our industry over here, which means that this bridge is necessary because of our land use decisions. So we've got all of this freight traffic that needs to get to the industry area and vice versa. So if we take a look at this, and I'll get into the correct view, we look at this, you can see that this freight traffic is coming all over the place. So, and a lot of it's going across this bridge, meaning it's going through these neighborhoods, making them loud. So you can see that right there as well. This is a loud road, not one that you want to live next to. So this neighborhood, Cypress Glen right here, in general, would be a loud neighborhood, because even though there are sound walls here, you've got a highway right here, and then really a collector that's functioning as an arterial with freight traffic going right by it. Another collector right here with freight traffic coming from the fishing industry. Just a lot of traffic, a lot of heavy traffic going by this. Now, to the author's credit, they have upgraded some of these roads, and they've given some buffering and space, and their land uses are helping things. We are, at least if we have all of these high traffic corridors, having uses on there that makes sense with that traffic. So on the rail side of things, one more thing that I need to point out. So there's some things going on here with this rail network. This did not come with the map like this. This is something that the creator put in, and it's just far too sharp. Now I think I know why they did it. And I understand. So this is a passenger train. And I've ridden an Amtrak. I actually rode the Amtrak from Denver to San Francisco to a wedding once. And one of the things that was great about that is you got some really striking views. Unfortunately, the speed going through the mountains is not great. And you have a lot of train track just like this, where it's curvy and windy, and what you see is the trains have to slow down to make it around all these angles. So I try to straighten some of these out, and maybe even moreover, ask if this is the best location for the cargo train terminal and the train metro hub. There might be a better location, and you wouldn't have to have this over here necessarily if your industry were in a different spot, but we'll get to that in the next section. My biggest concern right here is the ferries. So there's a very big emphasis on ferries to the point that we've actually taken this lake and joined it up with this lake. And I just don't think it makes sense for a city of this size. So from an aesthetic thing, it's great, but the utilization's low. The cost of this project would be very high. So I'm not sure that makes a ton of sense. And now you're paying for bridging and ferries. So the other thing to mention is the pedestrian control. So to me, the pedestrian network here tells a story. This was maybe at one point not a highway, but instead a local road, or maybe even just a traditional intersection at one point. And there was so much pedestrian traffic coming through here that it created massive gridlock. So the creator decided to build this pedestrian network to alleviate some of that, and I think it's just overdone. If you want to have a big pedestrian network like this, I'd recommend starting this a little bit closer. So rather than having these ramps come right up, people can cross streets. It's certainly safer this way, but this would be incredibly expensive. And to me, it just looks overdone. You also end up with an amount of pedestrian traffic in some of these areas that doesn't necessarily make sense for what it is. And I think it covers up for some of the land use decisions. So rather than having this in a dense area, it's kind of off to the side with big pedestrian paths. So I would definitely reconsider this area, think about these pedestrian paths, see if you can shorten them up if you want to keep the large pedestrian paths. That's certainly an option as well. It is heartening to see all of the pedestrian activity though. That is absolutely excellent. And the final thing I want to touch on is the traffic controls. Very pleased to see the way that they've gone through and very clearly thought about the priority of the roads here. So what I'm seeing is that they're looking at the traffic and then coming back in and adding junctions where they make sense. We're prioritizing our main roads. We're signalizing where our main roads come together. It's just thoughtful roadway planning. This right here, I'm glad to see that there are stop signs here, because this distance between the roundabout and this local road connection are inadequate. Otherwise, this would be very, very dangerous. If this were reality, I would expect to see lots of crashes here. Thankfully, not reality. So we're not going to see the crashes. So with that, roadway configuration and layout, lots of good things. A couple of things that could use a little bit of rethinking and retweaking. And in general, rather than planning the roadway network this way, where it seems like the roadway network came first and the city came second, I would really think about the land and plan the roadway network around the land. So this is a good example of that. It's just, it's not really telling me a story. It's telling me that it's kind of a suburban layout along the coast. Rather than utilizing the coast and making the most of the coastline, what we're doing is kind of just creating an interesting, visually interesting roadway layout, but it's not maximizing the coast. And I don't know that we're maximizing the waterfront with this roadway network. So for this, I'm going to give a score of 2.5 out of 5. Next up is land use planning, and this is one of the things that the map creator really excelled at. I really like what they're doing here. So first of all, what I see is a really nice mix of uses and uses that are logically placed. So we've got along our major thoroughfares, you don't really see much residential, which is good because those are not really, there's not really a great, they don't really flow well together. And as a result, these corridors have a lot of noise, a lot of activity, and that doesn't work well with residential properties. It does work really well with commercial properties. They need that visibility to be successful, and that's what they're getting when you put them on a collector or an arterial. The other thing that I see is that employment uses like these offices are right along these roads as well, and buffering from this residential. So very good. Nice to see them back to back. There's no big monoliths in terms of zoning. There is a lot of single family, but that's okay. One of the things that I like the most is what they've done with their heights. So what you can see here is it's very clear to see that they have a height restriction in this area right here. And I guarantee that if I pop in here and take a look, we're going to see under policies, there is a high-rise ban. Right here, that high-rise ban is gone. So they have this corridor along the main drag coming in, and it's kind of like Wilshire Boulevard in LA, where you have a corridor of high-rises and it opens up into the downtown area. I love that. That is really thoughtful in terms of the way that they're terracing this and transitioning between the building heights. That would help with shadows, that would help with views, and generally it would make the place feel more inviting. So what I do not like as much is that it's very condensed. So I mentioned that this is 4 tiles. So what you're seeing is that it's just a couple blocks away between the densest of the dense and the lowest of the low density. And same thing over here. It's a block separation between high rises and forestry industry. So I would love to see this city sprawl out a bit. So I don't mean let's have suburban sprawl forever. You could have urban neighborhoods that spread out quite a ways. And I'd love to see some of these industries have room to breathe and expand. They don't necessarily need to be this close to the downtown area. That said, it does fit within the narrative of what they were saying. Maybe the bigger critique is that these high rises maybe just aren't warranted just yet. And if there wasn't the focus on the high rises, you could spread things out just a little bit more. So in general, I like the way that they've laid things out. I did mention earlier that I do question the location of the industry. So the main reason for that, so I think that the location of the industry tells me a story. The map creator wanted the industry to be close to the highway, and that makes sense on most maps. But because there's only one highway inlet outlet, I think it actually makes more sense to locate the industry near the rail. That's historically where it would have been located. And on a map like this, if you wanted to be able to cut in and combine these lakes and tell a story, floating logs down the river, that's something that you would change the lakes for. You'd create a lake for that even. So I could see the industry area being really successful over here, having great access to both of these rail networks without a big extension, and then giving the city proper room to spread out this way and this way. So that's something that I would definitely reconsider. But in general, lots of good stuff happening here. And for land use planning, I'm going to give them a score of 3.5 out of 5. Okay, so next up, we're taking a look at transit, and there is a lot going on in terms of transit here. So let's hop in and take a look. So the utilization for the transit network for a city of this size, so we've got about 34,500 residents. To have 3,000 resident trips per week, and a little under 1,000 tourist trips, that's pretty darn impressive. So the bus network in this community is phenomenal. So let's take a look at this. I'll get this out of the way. Let's close this down a little bit. What you'll see is that there's been a great deal of attention paid to the bus network. So we've got all of our lines named. We've got counterclockwise and clockwise routes. Their system is logically laid out. And in general, I like what they've done. The only critique I have of the bus network is that there are not transfer opportunities. You're forcing people to walk a block or two, potentially not the end of the world, but it's something that could be improved. Like for this line right here, having some interface between this downtown line would be helpful. Otherwise, you're really only circulating people through the downtown area, maybe from this metro station. And maybe that's the way that they've designed it. I just think that, having opportunities to not force a transfer between the bus, metro, bus would be good. Being able to go from bus to bus, would be very, very helpful. So just one consideration there. Another thing that I noticed is that there is a great deal of utilization of metros. So let's take a look at that right now. So we've got 3 lines coming through here. So we looked at this earlier. Let's pull this over here. So this is the train metro hub. And I think this is maybe the asset that spurred the entire metro system. Could be wrong about that. But right here, what we see is that our metro system has 2 lines that come and meet here. I guess there's a 3rd line. Let's see. We've got, a 3rd line branching off from here that goes all the way up to the Shoresight district, which is, a really high density district along this area, which is an interesting decision. I'm not sure how I feel about this, but if it's going to exist, I'm happy to see that it has high capacity transit. That said, a city of this size, it's probably a little bit too much. And the utilization of this tells me a story. And that story is that people are using it because there aren't other ways to get around. So I talked a little bit about this. Our traffic flow has improved after we made those couple of changes, but our pedestrian experience in this community is not great. And that is partially because we had a whole bunch of paths and no way to cross the road. So obviously we could go into Traffic Manager. Okay, so we could certainly come in here, add a node, and then come through and, we could add a signal here then, either through Traffic Manager, or honestly, we could even do this, I believe, node controller. We could go ahead and switch this, crossing, there we go. So node controller could help us with this. And there we go. We're adding the ability to cross. This would really improve things. And I wonder, my curiosity, if we added a whole bunch of crossings, if this wouldn't ultimately end up leading to lower transit utilization, which might sound crazy to you. But the reality is right now, with walking being such a precarious option in this city, it would be faster to take transit, even for short trips. So I think that if we went through and shortened the block lengths or added all of these pedestrian connections, and you can see all the utilization that we're seeing now. People are crossing left and right through here. If we added all of these, I think what you see is a whole lot less transit utilization. And that might decrease the need to actually have some of this high capacity transit. So I would be very curious about that. I could be wrong, and I haven't added enough connections most likely through here to really fully test that. But that would certainly be something I would be thinking about. The other thing, now that we've got the content creator packs, so if we take a look at an individual line, what we're seeing is that these vehicles are completely full before they get to one of these stops. So they've had to increase the vehicle count. Now with these great high capacity metros, we have the ability to have 500 passengers in one of these routes on each vehicle. Thanks to B. Skogelhausen for putting those together in the content creator pack. So this is something that if you're going to do this and it's going to be configured this way, this is how I would solve it, because ultimately that's the only way that you're going to not have all that passing. So that's a bit of an issue to me. So I'd go through here, I'd do that for all of these, and ultimately that means you're going to have less passing, and you could probably have many fewer vehicles on here and save a little bit of money on that service. So something to consider. Now, finally, I really want to take a look at the ferry system, because what I'm seeing here is that we've got one route that has some passengers, and that's this route that also has a metro going basically the same route, and they're cannibalizing each other. So to prioritize the ferries so much in this city and have the metro is probably a problem. If you get rid of the metro, this ferry is going to just go gangbusters. So I would choose one or the other. I certainly understand the ferry for the aesthetic purposes, but that would certainly be a consideration. The ferries don't carry a lot, and that's one of the unfortunate things. There's no other vehicle. You'd have to see if you could pick one up from the workshop or something. with advanced vehicle selector, but without that, to me, it just, even though we're seeing some utilization, it's underutilized and not really worth the cost. So, and this is the most successful line. That's the other thing to keep in mind. The other lines that we have one over here that's going to the fishing industry, downtown. It's not really doing much of anything at all. We're seeing one passenger on a ferry. That line would be shut down so fast. So that's, I would generally look at this city and ask, does it just make more sense at this size, at this population, at this density to really focus on walking and the bus service and, waiting for higher capacity transit till a future date and time. It's just a little bit too much right now. That said, it's still a really fantastic transit network. To see that kind of utilization in a city this size is fantastic. And as a result, I'm going to give them a score of 4 out of 5. So next up, we're going to take a look at city services. So I'm going to go right down the list and we'll see how things look. So first of all, let's start with our utilities. And what you can see is that we are really producing some power. And that is great. We have overhead. I am a little dubious about using the lake for wind power. I just don't know that I agree with that decision. It impacts the views and it would be pretty unsightly. And you have a view corridor right to it. And from all the high rises, you'd see that as well. That said, we're doing well there. Water, we've got great water coverage. I like that over here, what we're seeing is a little utility campus starting to form. We've got water coverage here. We've got trash. That's great. And the one thing that I love, and I'm going to give a point for this, is we've got an artful use of water pipes, mastering water pipes underneath the road where they belong. I will forgive this little island because look at some of these. Look at that. That is good. I like that. This is a work of art. So really, really impressed with that. That said, one of the things I thought was interesting is the water pumping system is really dispersed. And I thought about that for a while and I actually agree with it. So if you were to pump all from one lake, what you're going to see is you're going to start draining the lake. You're going to start to pull water out faster than the game can replenish it. So that would be a problem. So it's good that, we've got water pumps here, we've got water pumps here, we've got water pumps here and here. I just wonder if there's a way to clean it up a little bit. That would be something I would think about. Or like this, I really like using the water towers too. I think that makes some good sense. But the coverage is really good there. If we take a look at our garbage capacity, we're doing pretty good there as well. There are some problems with picking up trash. I think a lot of that has to do with the roadway network and the lack of connectivity. And we could resolve some of that adding more connectivity, like I mentioned. I do question as well how dispersed the trash collection is. I don't think it needs to be this dispersed in a city of this size. So I would look to create a little campus here like you've done with the water. I think it would look really neat. I think it would feel more organic in a community of this size. And as long as your roadway network issues are sorted out, I think it would function really, really well because you've done a great job with roadway hierarchy. So next, we need to take a look at some of our other city services like healthcare. So the healthcare in this city, I think, is probably a little overdone. And I think this has to do with the roadway network, but you can't argue with the results. 88% citizen health is excellent. The death care, interestingly, this has improved since I started up. So death care, there were a bunch of bodies piling up. I think that the roadway connectivity we added through here has cut the number of deceased people waiting to be picked up in half. So just showing how a little bit of roadway connectivity can really work wonders. And I think that with a little bit more, you're perfect on your death care. Now, childcare and elder care are places where this build really excels. So your childcare, 95% child health care, really impressive. Elder care, 92. Lots of elder care facilities. I initially was thinking, wow, this is a lot, but maybe it's not. The lifespan is 83 years, and this translates into supremely happy citizens. Everyone's loving life, except for this person. Oh, that's a commercial building. They're not happy, and we see that there's not enough goods to sell. That's again, traffic problems. So in general, looking very good there. Now we move on to fire coverage. So this number is lower than I think it should be. So I believe that this person does not have the natural disasters DLC enabled. Now I have it. So as a result, you're going to see the forest light up like, I don't know, an apple. It's really, really red. The city itself is pretty good. There are a couple of areas that aren't great. I think that there's a lot of fire departments, and I'm thinking that this is, again, the lack of roadway connectivity, because when we take a look at our police departments, there's like nothing. There's also not enough jail capacity, and our crime rate's a little higher than it should be, and our coverage just isn't good. To me, again, that's roadway connectivity. The roads, even though I added those connections through here, the police cars can't drive on those. So if we were using the vanilla plus road pack and we had pedestrian roads through there, that would do the trick. That would solve some of these issues, because they can still drive on those. So that might be something I would consider. The other thing is just, we've got our small police departments. So if we take a look right here in our downtown, our densest part of the community, we've got a little baby police station. And then over here, another little tiny one. And we've got our main police department over by the theme park. There's a lot of density here, so that makes some sense. But I would think that the downtown either should have this larger police station, and I always get these wrong. Police station, police headquarters. The police headquarters should be downtown with a police station over here, or we need another police headquarters, and that would solve everything. And you could see, if I go through and I add this, it just kind of solves all the problems. There are still a couple. We don't have great coverage over here, but we're in a much better place. That also works to remedy our jail cell issues. We could honestly probably use another police department over here. That's a terrible location right on that collector. But that kind of blankets the city in coverage, and hopefully gets the people out of the forestry main building that are apparently embezzling. So I think that is one of the bigger issues there. So again, water pipes masterfully placed, coverage pretty good for almost everything. Really happy citizens. That's super impressive. And because of all of this, I'm going to give them a 3.5 out of 5 for city services. Great job. So next, we're taking a look at unique features. And unique features are things like buildings, parks, universities. So things like this and things like this, and also things like this. So let's take a look. So first of all, I just want to really commend this author or this map creator on their restraint. Often you'll see that people are just really overdoing it on the unique buildings. But right here, you can see that there really aren't that many of them. We've got the city arch, we've got a statue, the Mall of Moderation, boat museum, a couple of taller buildings over here, and then the Museum of Modern Art. And it's being used in a way that it really accentuates the coastline. I love that. Use buildings purposefully. Use them in a way that they make sense, rather than just using them as a way to boost land value. And that's exactly what this person is doing. So excellent job using the unique buildings. Now moving on to the Park Life DLC is obviously in here, and they have done a really nice job incorporating some of the features of that. Right here, we've got some hot air balloon tours. We've got a really nice theme park here. And one of the things I love about the theme park is, first of all, it'd be visible from the downtown area, kind of an advertisement for it, visible from the transit, another advertisement for this. And then if you were up here, if you're at the top right here, going down the roller coaster, you have a view of all of the lakes and of downtown. How cool is that? Now, it's a little bit rough around the edges. I think that there's a couple of things that can be done to clean it up a little bit. But in general, I think it's well laid out. It makes sense. And I like that it's along the water. I just wish that this power plant wasn't here. It's like one of those things that because it's there, it's what you would see. It's what you'd focus. It would be the presence here. You just kind of got a number of ugly buildings that are facing this. And if this is the tourism attraction, I'd want it to be a little bit more buffered from those sorts of uses. The other thing, there is transit here that makes it very successful. I would love to see a little bit more work done with this particular ped crossing. I don't know that a roundabout is the best choice of junction for here, truthfully. So I think I know why it's here. I think there were probably some issues when this collector was connected directly up to here that led to the roundabout going in, but it's just kind of awkward to have a roundabout with a use like this directly on it. It's not, I don't know that I've ever seen that. You would definitely want to keep your land uses off from the roundabout and have some sort of access road to the roundabout that the land use itself is on. So just a consideration there. If you're going to have this here, I would make it not a roundabout and just make it a road. I can't upgrade that, and I don't know that I have anarchy. I do. So I would just formalize that as some sort of circular road and go ahead and just add a crossing there. So now people could just skip this if they want, and if they want to get here, they can. They have options. Now, from a traffic standpoint, this kind of stinks. You could certainly prioritize that movement through here, and hopefully that would improve things. Honestly, it's probably just not the best choice for this area, but this is a way that you could handle it to make it a little bit more reasonable. At least now this isn't a roundabout and you could have a land use on it. So something that you could do. Not a lot of great options here, but I would certainly I would get rid of that. I don't like that. I think that it makes the park look a lot better not to have that too. And you could clean up the fences a little bit. So just a couple of things there. And then I want to get on to what I really, really love. So I talked a little bit about this forestry industry. This is artful. I love it. It's big, it's doing a lot, and it's really producing a lot as well. So this industry is profitable. And you can leave it just like this. You're just producing logs and shipping it off somewhere else. I like that if that's what the game plan is, we do have the ability to ship it right here. Traffic flow, not too bad. There is a little bit of cheesing here, but I'll allow it. One of the ways, if we take a look at the cheesing, you can see under junctions, we've got a junction here to try to make that circular pattern happen. I think that there's a more artful way of doing this, but you can't argue with the results. What we're seeing is that the traffic, even though it's red, it's flowing, and that's ultimately what we want. The traffic flow is getting really good now that we've made those couple of connections on the main drag. So if you wanted to, you could certainly, what we're looking at here is we got 208 tons of raw forestry products being generated, and most of that is just being outputted as raw forestry products. So we have 25 tons being turned into planed timber, and that 24 tons is worth more than that 173 tons that we're just dumping out as raw logs. So just something to keep in mind. Your city's, it's profitable most of the time. This thing could be just printing money by turning some of these forestry products into finished goods. Or if you wanted to go the next step beyond that, unique factory goods. But even at that, not every city has to do that. You can be totally fine having your forestry industry just like this. And I love that they've made sure that the trees inside their forestry industry line up with the trees in the map. It makes it feel so good. And that's wonderful. They've done a great job with that. So in general, for unique features, I think that they've done a pretty darn good job. And finally, I want to highlight their fishing industry. Obviously, this is a big part of what they're doing on this map, and it's really, really impressive. It brings life into this water. So this is the Seven Lakes map, and you have made the lake a really big part of the community. So that's really impressive. If we take a look at our fishing routes, you can see that they're just all over the place, and that's great. We're really taking advantage. We can even extend this further. If you're going to join these lakes up, I'd love to see fishing routes going through there. I'd love to see fishing routes on each of these lakes, truthfully, unless you're going to specify what the purpose of each of the lakes are. It would really be a way to breathe even more life into this area. So in general, for unique features, I think that they've done a lot. I'm really impressed, and I'm going to give them a score of 3.5 out of 5. And then finally, we are going to take a look at city aesthetics. So for aesthetics, this is something that is really challenging when you're starting out with the game. Even at the intermediate level, it can be challenging. And there are some good things happening here, and I've highlighted some of those things. And there are some bad things happening here. I'm going to highlight some of those as well. So in general, I think that they are well on their way. They're taking a number of things and running with it that I really like. I like that they're using fences here to create a buffer, to channelize some of their zoning, and to create a nice ambiance here. That's really great. And there are little details like that throughout. That said, there are also a couple of small issues throughout that kind of crop up. Things like jagged fences, things that aren't quite as clean as they could be. Right here, there was a road neck down from a 4-lane to a 2-lane before entering this roundabout. I turned that into a 4-lane just to clean up the aesthetic of it. And then there are things like all of these paths that look really nice but don't function as well as they should. I really like a lot of things about this city, but the aesthetics I think could use a little bit of work. I didn't highlight the city park as much as I should have in the previous section. This park has a lot going on. It's a nice park, and it really brings nature into the city, but it also has some problems, like this clinic seems to be dropped into the corner of it. So there are small issues like that, but my biggest issue with the entire build is the key walling. I don't know if I can use that as a verb, but I'm going to anyway. Key walling. So the key walls, before I understood how to use them, I avoided them. And then once I understood it, it's really hard to go back. So if you're going to have all of this stuff along the coast, it's really nice to clean it up with a key wall. So I can show you what I mean. So right here, we've got this fishing island. So we'll relocate this temporarily. Oh, it wants to be on a roadside or a park. There. Just go there for a minute. So we could go ahead, grab a key wall, and start to clean this up a little bit. And then you can move this right onto the key wall and it snaps. So that can be really helpful. Now, obviously, I didn't do a great job with this. Ideally, I could certainly be a move it master and come through here and do all of that. And that's not really fair to ask of them, considering that they've built this vanilla. But it's certainly something that with enough patience in vanilla and enough, kind of futzing around with it, you can do a lot of really neat stuff and make this look really nice. And I think it really cleans up the aesthetic of the build. So that is something that kind of throughout, there are little key walls. So I'd say either go with them or get rid of them. And if you're going to go with them, you got to use them all over the place. So here in particular, it would have really cleaned things up, but I'm okay with it not having them as well. It's kind of nice to see some consistency there. So there's a lot of detail in the neighborhoods in terms of paths and parks. And I do see some trees. I don't know if they're snuck in there or not, or that's the vanilla assets. So it's just that the zoning happens to work for it. Lots of trees throughout the build on the side to fill it in, make it come to life. So some good things there, but I do think it's a little bit rough around the edges. Things like this pedestrian path. So this is one of the places I'm gonna go a little bit lower. So again, key walls, I'd love to see a little bit more attention to some of the detail. And, even though there are things like that, there's one thing I just got to point out. So I said that I disagreed with the functionality of this, but I really love the idea of this train. So I mentioned going from Denver to San Francisco. The views on this would be absolutely striking if there weren't the trees there or in places where there aren't. So there are a couple of choices here that from an aesthetic standpoint are great function, maybe not so great. But for this, I think with some of the issues that I see in the build, we're going to have to give it a 2 out of 5. Now you know what that means. We need a quick drum roll. Because we are about to give the City Planner City score, and this city gets a score of 24 out of 35. And with that, here is where this city lines up with the other cities that we've reviewed. So it's kind of middle of the pack, but it's good, and it's got good bones. I think that with a little bit of tweaking, you could see this really function well and really shine. And one of the things that I'm going to be doing with some of the builds that we've previously reviewed is just do kind of a mini 5-minute review of the way that the creators have improved the maps after some of the feedback, not just from myself, but from the comments. And I would absolutely invite this creator to come back with another map, because I know that this map is old at this point. This map was submitted last year, but I just really love the Seven Lakes map. I love what they've done, and I wanted to take a look at it. And I would invite them to submit another map. We'll see how they take the feedback and iterate and improve. And with that, one last thing that we've got to do is take a look around this map. But before we do that, if you like this video, please hit the like button. If you aren't subscribed, please consider doing so. And I really thank you for taking the time to watch this build with me. Let me know what you think of my score. Is it high enough? Is it too high? Are there things that you would like to see improved? What did you love about this? Tell me what you loved about this, because there is a lot to love here. There's certainly some critiques, but there's a lot to love here. It's a really nice looking city. Like you take a look at night, and good planning leads to an attractive city, and they did a good job. So let's have that quick city tour. Take care. Bye-bye.